Now, finding traditional scale models difficult to do nowadays, at least at the level that I used to be able to work at, I started looking for alternative model making hobbies that my disabilities would allow me to do. One of the pastimes that I thought might scratch that crafting itch, but still be manageable given my reduced dexterity, is Lego, or one of the other brick-based construction sets that are now available. My daughter bought me a small set of Lego based on the Indiana Jones movies for me to try. This theme set depicts the chase scene from the third film in the series, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which includes the figures, car and plane from the iconic sequence where Indy and his father were being chased by the Nazi bad guys in a fighter plane. To be honest, I didn't really know what to expect by way of parts in the box or complexity of build, as the last time I had a Lego set was all the way back in 1969 when my parents bought me a lovely big set called the Complete Town Plan set. Now, Lego was a lot different back then, and despite this being a fantastic set and having a huge amount of bricks, the variety of types of bricks, when compared to today's Lego, were quite low. There certainly wasn't the kind of very specialised parts that you get in today's sets, and the resultant models you could make with the old style Lego was extremely blocky by comparison. So the first big surprise for me when opening the first of the 3 included bags of parts in this set was seeing the multitude of different shapes and sizes of the Lego that goes into making up the first half of this diorama, which includes Indy, his father and the little car. The little full colour instruction booklet that was included in the set scared me a little, as I discovered that there was a total of 53 stages in putting the little car together, and then there was even more steps in order to make the little plane. This was going to be a lot more complex than I expected. The other minor scare I got was the very small and fiddly looking parts that were included in the set, and my most immediate concern was losing some of these tiny parts to what we scale modellers call the carpet monster. So my first priority was to buy a compartmentalised plastic container to sort and put all the parts in to keep them safe. Another little surprise difference between traditional plastic scale model making and the Lego equivalent was the inclusion of stickers. While I have dealt with water slide transfers for my models before, I found the placing of stickers was an art form unto itself. Put them down in slightly the wrong position and they're a pig to get back up again and can be damaged in the process. So a lot of care and patience has to be taken to get these darn things right in the first place. Now, as you can see, as if the placing of the stickers wasn't tricky enough, I also had to deal with my random wobbly hand playing up. This is an intermittent issue, but most of the time I can edit out these episodes. But its occurrence while placing one of the tricky stickers was definitely a bit of bad timing. But after a bit of a break, I was able to continue, so no harm was done. But you can now probably imagine what might have happened if I had been brush painting a conventional plastic scale model. And this is exactly the reason I'm migrating to model making with a more forgiving format like Lego. In a funny way, Lego building is more akin to doing a sort of 3D jigsaw puzzle. Scale modelling can sometimes be rather stressful as you struggle to achieve realism, but Lego is a far more relaxing and chilled out pastime. Well, that's what I think anyway. It might sound a bit strange, but in a funny way, Lego is a lot more of a complex form of building than a scale model. Well, in my opinion anyway. With a scale model, you can see right from the get-go exactly what the purpose of each part is because they are formed realistically to represent a real object, only in miniature. But with Lego, even with the instructions right in front of you, you're left kind of wondering where all this is going. Take the part that I'm working on here. Just what is this? It doesn't look like anything I can recognise from the real world. So where is this construction leading? Of course, I could answer this question quite easily by skipping ahead a few pages in the manual, but I'm finding the whole mystery journey aspect of Lego building is an added feature that makes this process very therapeutic. Just go with it and trust the bricks man. On the other hand, however, sometimes Lego can be a little too mysterious, at least in its means of construction anyway. And this highlights one of the small problems with the printed manual. 2D illustrations sometimes aren't ideal for explaining a three-dimensional problem. Luckily, my daughter put me onto a little app called Lego Builder. It's an interactive version of the manual which replicates the stages in the build but allows you to manipulate the model in 3 dimensions. This is really handy when it's a little unclear what's going on in the booklet, especially when you can't see what's behind or underneath an illustrated part. There's a nice little moment in Lego building where you suddenly twig what might be going on. What was a jumble of blocks and plates now becomes a recognisable element. It's a real buzz as you kind of feel you're getting somewhere now. But this also raises a question in your head, especially as a beginner like myself. How do these designer boffins at Lego come up with these constructions? Some seem so bizarre in the choice of parts chosen, which again ends up making sense, but at the time you think this is just sheer craziness. The design team must use some form of software to judge the chain of construction and what fits where and in what order, so they end up with a model that looks roughly like the original subject. They can't just be riffing the build, surely. And then there's the whole testing to ensure all the parts do create a consolidated whole. Do they get it wrong sometimes? Actually, judging by the Airfix quick build I've just completed, which was kind of like my introduction to brick building, yeah, sometimes not everything fits perfectly. So when a Lego or generic brick model does go together solidly, you have to give the chaps at the Lego factory their due. Well done, guys. Coming from a scale model background, having to be so trustful of the brick build process can be a little unnerving. We scale modelers always like to know exactly what we're doing. This and the addition of a more relaxed pace does make me a little impatient at times, and I can hear my brain saying, get on with it. But this is just part of the whole change from one form of model making to another. I have to stick with it in this early stage of transferring hobbies and chill myself down and attune myself to the new rhythm that is brick building. I guess it's akin to being a 100 metres runner who moves over to doing the 1500 metres event. There's a palpable change in gears. But here's the weird thing. I can really feel the change taking over, and I'm starting to adopt the more casual and less serious persona of the brick builder. That's not to say brick builders can't be serious at times. You just have to watch some of the pro videos on YouTube to realise that some people take this hobby very, very seriously indeed. But generally, I think brick building is an analeptic pastime for the majority of people who do it, a comforting and almost zen-like combination of freeing the mind by doing a precise and repetitive craft. Okay, I may be reading a little too much into this, particularly as one of the principal reasons for brick building is fun. And in this, I'm certainly succeeding because I've found myself having a lot of fun doing this build. Now, having said all that about my struggling to chill out a bit, I then found myself going almost too far in the opposite direction. Now, this is obviously my fault, because I guess I'm being a bit of a scale model snob, and I initially regarded brick building as a less complicated and simplistic hobby. So at first, I was telling myself how easy and straightforward all this was. That's what you call complacency. As no sooner had I begun to relax, too much as it turns out, that I realised that something was wrong with the way the build was going. I suddenly floundered, and the next steps in the manual just didn't seem to make sense. My first reaction was to blame the bricks. That was until I woke myself up a bit and went back a few pages in the booklet, and I realised, I had made a boob and put some parts on back to front, or more precisely, at the opposite end of the build that they were supposed to be. So it just goes to show that if you aren't careful, LEGO can lull you into an almost transmental state. Turns out you really have to be on the ball, as even one slightly out of position placement of a single part can really throw a spanner in the works. And then you have to backtrack, disassembling a portion of what you've built already to get to the darn culprit before continuing again. I didn't half give myself a mental slap for screwing this bit up, and I felt a bit of an idiot. That's what you get for being aloof about this type of model making in comparison to others. Lesson learned. Now this is funny. Occasionally you get a specialist part in your model, and as a beginner you find yourself saying, "Hooray, I actually know what this bit is." And as if by magic, the build suddenly starts to make sense, and you get a reference point of where you are in the overall build. Again, this could be my new catchphrase, but trust the bricks. Anyway, getting the fenders on was a bit of a milestone for me, and after seemingly languishing in the land of the unspecified brick, I'm now out of the undergrowth and on my way. But then, horror, I have the crevasse of tiny fiddly bits to negotiate. Now, this was my biggest dread, how my wobbly and clumsy hand was going to deal with parts that I could hardly get a grip on. These are mostly those 1x1 size pieces, and they all seem to be very keen on getting away from me. My fat fingers barely seem to be able to contain them before they ping off into the darkest corners of my hobby room. There were quite a few video cuts and second and third takes at this point in the video build. And oh, the language. I kept hearing a tiny voice from the wife downstairs asking, "Am I alright up there?" Yes, I grumbled as I got down on my hands and knees for the umpteenth time to look for the darn things. But I guess if that's my only gripe about LEGO, then it's not bad going, really. After all, chubby sausage fingers isn't LEGO's fault. We're now starting to move on to the upper interior of the car, and some of these parts really emphasise to me the difference between old school LEGO and new LEGO. Some of these were weird looking bricks, if you can call them that, and were so unique as to make me wonder if they were just designed for this one model build, though I'm sure they're not. But this did make me think about just how large the LEGO inventory of brick types must be these days compared to the 1970s when I first had a set. And if there's one element that exemplifies the difference between the old and the new LEGO, it's the addition of stickers. There's only one small sheet of stickers for this kit, and luckily they are all of a reasonable size. But I have seen comments online about how some sets have a large amount of stickers, some of which are designed to fit on those dastardly 1x1 bricks. I'm glad there's none of these here. Anyway, I seem to have got the knack of dealing with their placement, and my precision craft knife, or you can use fine tweezers I suppose, seemed to be the best way to handle the stickers without it having so much grip that it was then hard to place the sticker onto the brick. My early attempts at using fingers often led to the sticker being stuck to both my finger and the brick at the same time. Then there ensued a sort of tug of war until one of them ended up with the sticker attached. The one thing I haven't stopped doing is holding my breath while I'm trying to place the sticker. I guess I'll get over that eventually. Things seemed to be going really well at this point, and I began to work on the inside of the car, beginning with the rear seating and working forward from there. I thought while doing this that the pieces might be laying the foundation for the boot, or trunk, of the car, but that was just a guess, as Lego was being its usual inscrutable self about what certain bricks were intended for. I know, trust the bricks. But just when I thought things were sailing along quite smoothly, I hit one of those stages where the paper manual wasn't clear enough about what to do next, or rather, where certain parts were to be located, and therefore I had to break out my phone with the Lego Builder app on it again. It really does help being able to swing around the instructional illustrations of the virtual model so I could see the car compartment and where particular parts were supposed to be fitted. Now, at this point in the video, we're finally about halfway through the build, and that's presuming that you're still watching. I have to apologise for the length of this video. I simply had no idea how long 53 steps of a build would take me to complete, this being my very first of the new Lego kits that I've ever made. I kind of wanted to run through each stage exactly how it was in real time so that anybody interested could see what was going into making this set. Plus, that said, I did speed up the video ever so slightly to try and cut down the overall length, but it's still going to be a long one. And this means the second part of this video, the making of the plane, will be even slightly longer, as that one has over 60 stages in the construction of the piece. As I intend to build a lot more of these brick models, I may have to think again about how I will film the build process. I could save some time by cutting out my shots of the manual pages, or I could do less of a rambling commentary, of course, or do what I've seen them do in other video channels that do brick builds and cut down the shots to just the clicking together of the parts in a sort of stop motion or time lapse. Anyway, I hope this isn't boring for you. I mean, I'd watch it all, but then I'm a great big nerd about stuff like this. Others might not be so patient. And this is probably a good time to mention that if you did enjoy watching this, you great big weirdo, then perhaps consider subscribing to my channel. I do a range of different model related hobby videos, but as I say, I'll be including a lot more of these brick builds. After a few more outtakes of wobbly hand madness, I eventually got myself calmed down a bit and back on with the building again. I liked here the way that the special shaped plates formed the bonnet of the car. And then, as I moved back and forward from one end of the car to the other, it looked like I was right about some of the previous selection of parts being the basis for the trunk of the car. I seemed to be working on some form of hinged part and thought to myself that this would allow me to swing open the trunk once I'd completed that section of the model. It seemed a complex little gizmo, and I had to admire the ingenious work of the Lego designers again, as they produced such clever little parts to solve tricky little design problems. Further work on the trunk ensued, and despite dreading the 1x1 size Lego pieces, I loved the little candy coloured brake lights and the nicely done spare wheel cover, and I presumed that this must be the trunk door I was making. I wondered if this was going to attach to the cunning little hinge I'd just made to allow the component to open and close. Anywho, with the door piece together, the next few stages seemed to be another hinge contraption that I thought confirmed my suspicions about the opening and closing trunk door. Much to my surprise, this particular little hinge element was even more sneaky in its construction than the last. Well, that's what I thought anyway. I love the way the new Lego, as opposed to the old traditional brick system I remember, now comes up with solutions to build components in 360-degree directions. Building in opposite directions was always quite difficult in the old days, if you wanted to represent a realistic design. Everything was about placing one brick on top of another and very acute angles. These days, however, there seems to be a multitude of clever solutions in order to change the build direction and attach other components in a host of directions and angles. It's actually worth googling how things like cars and planes used to have to be built back in the day in comparison to how they're built nowadays. There was a cute blockiness to the old method, and they did rely a lot more heavily on the builder's imagination, I think. You had to be a little bit more relaxed in your interpretation of reality and accept that that blocky structure you've just put together is actually a plane or a boat or a car. Different times. The new Lego goes the extra yard to make what is essentially still the trademark blockiness a little bit more refined and a closer rendition of the subject that it's actually supposed to be. And by the way, before I forget, amazingly, all these pieces that I thought were leading up to a hinged trunk door actually weren't in the end. They were, it turned out, just a very complex way of changing the build direction and making a very nicely sloped rear end to the vehicle. Sorta clever, but at the same time a bit of a shame it didn't end up with an opening boot. Well, it was back to the front of the car again, with some very nice pieces to represent the radiator and lights of the car. At this point I really felt that I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, as I knew I only had a few more pages left to go in the instructions. I was really starting to get rather excited now, and it was a very satisfying feeling. The way the chunky little headlights were put together was very nice, and they really give this little cute car something of a goofy face. I'm not sure what make of car this model is based on, but it's quirky enough to look a little like a French model, I think. Okay, spoiler alert, I googled it and I was right. The car used in the movie was a 1954 Citroën, now let's see if I can get this right, Ligier Cabriolet sedan. Rather amusingly, as the story was supposed to have been set in 1938, but the unique little vehicle kind of fitted the comic look I think that the director wanted. I thought the way Lego created the curved bumper was clever, again showing the difference in how new, more elegant solutions are done. In the old days, this would just have been a plain straight block or plate if we'd even bothered with doing something specific as a detailed car bumper in the first place. Now this made me smile. In the end we do get an opening trunk as Lego has made a little lockbox which kind of sits in between the seats and the sloped rear end of the car. I was really pleased with this addition, but it shows how Lego, over the years, has morphed into a hybrid model making construction set. A piece like this chest would have been inconceivable in my day, but now Lego enhances the playability of their models by adding specialist component parts like this. And this reminded me that while, as an adult builder, I have been commenting mainly from the point of view of a veteran model maker, that Lego is still primarily a toy intended to be played with, and little touches like this are just the sort of things that can boost the joy of imaginative play by their inclusion. Today's kids are indeed very lucky. Well, we've reached the last 2 pages in the manual, and once again we get a little play piece in the form of a small suitcase which we can pop into the back of the car. But laughingly, I near the end of this build by making one of my several little mistakes in the placement of parts, and I call myself a veteran model maker for goodness sake. I'd clipped in the seat separator part too far back into the space which was intended to hold the suitcase, Not a biggie, but rather amusing and easily rectified. Though I suppose you could say that this is another big advantage of brick building sets over traditional scale plastic models. I have in the past glued model kit parts in the wrong place or the wrong way round, and believe me, that can be annoying and harder to rectify sometimes. At least with Lego, it's just a matter of popping off the misplaced part and reattaching it in the correct location. And so, we get to the installation of the last parts of this model, the wheels. Pretty straightforward, although one little thing, one side of the wheel hubs is moulded with a kind of spokes detail, but Lego indicates that this should be placed to the inside when fitting the wheels to the model. I personally thought it was a shame to hide this and preferred to reverse the wheels with the spokes facing to the outside. I guess there's no right or wrong, but it's just a preference. And that's it, Indiana Jones's little car complete. And now we can look forward to the building of the second half of this diorama, the fighter plane. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this build, and if you've stayed to the end, thanks so much, and remember to subscribe to get a heads up when I upload the second part of this Lego build. I'll just leave you with some shots of the completion and the finished model. Cheers for being so patient and watching this video.